Meeting in order. Start with the roll call.
Yes, Tom Duster,
Here.
Scott Holwick. Here. Roger Lang,
Here.
Renee Davis,
Here.
Dan Wolford,
Here.
Ken Houston,
Here.
Wes Lowry,
Here.
Kevin Bowden,
Here.
Hope Bartlett, here, Chris Hufford,
Here.
and Heather McIntyre is here, Councilmember Martin, here, Jerry Young, quorum.
Just a quick question, Scott, are we gonna see Scott on the screen?
He is currently driving, so you won't see him, but when he's here.
Drive faster, Scott. Okay, let's start with the approval of previous minutes, last month's minutes. Any questions or comments about last month's minutes?
Hearing none, I'll move to approve.
Second.
I can second.
All right. Oh, sure.
No, I thought you were seconding. You're like, great. And then I realized you
You
can't.
said this, so I said, okay, good job. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Scott? Did you hear that?
Yes, I said aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kevin, water status report?
Yeah, this morning the flow on the St. Vrain was 55.4 CFS with a 125-year average of 55 CFS. The call on the St. Vrain this morning is the Swede ditch, which is 1871 line. Call on the South Platte River is still number one. It's an 88 water rate. Mouth Price Reservoir this morning was at full and spilling with 2/10 more of the spillway and approximately 16,248 feet in storage. Union Reservoir is at an elevation of 25.8 feet or 11,170 acre feet, which is down approximately 1,600 acre feet. Basin reservoirs at the end of August were at 78.5%.
Quick question, when, time-wise in the year, this flood rock stuff is still, is it unusual for it to still be coming out
No, but it's shortly.
shortly?
We'll probably business spill here pretty soon.
Any questions for Kevin? All right, thanks, Kevin. Any agenda revisions?
Yeah.
All right, Wes, as far as development activity,
Nothing this month.
I'll tell you, let me suggest something, this cash and new thing, why don't we wait till Scott gets landed, so we can hear things, and get the other nine, put this aside for a minute, and go on to item number 9, is that all right? Maybe an interesting discussion, so. Okay, go. Are you ready to go already? or-
I'm ready.
I didn't
Never
mean
need to go
shock
first.
you, but you're on.
I'm ready. So just some brief land conservation program updates. We're doing the Kensington Park turf transition project. We're calling it Kensington Park Grass to Garden. We're removing 3,000 square feet of grass around the Kensington Park mosaic, and the construction, if it has not been removed, is being removed probably as we speak, hopefully. And the soil being amended by contractors, and then we're having a planting event at the Kensington neighborhood this Saturday. So from 9 to noon, we'll be inviting the neighbors to come and plant the actual plants in the ground around the garden. And then we're also hosting a resource fair. So sustainability, CSU extension, Longmont food rescue are just a few of the booths that will be there as resources for the neighbors. And then we're also having Sweet Cow food truck, breakfast burritos and coffee, which is a great combination at 9 a.m.
I eat ice cream for breakfast.
Heck yeah, it's the best way to do it. We had a successful event on the 6th of this month, Stories of the St. Vrain. It's called Flood, Fire, and Friendship. And I was invited to be on a panel of community water leaders to discuss the flood and water conservation. So that got picked up by the paper and was really successful outreach and had a lot of really great community input, so it was great. We are in the midst of our water efficiency master plan. We met with our consultants, the engineering and operations administrator and the planning and development services director a couple weeks ago, just so that we can ensure that everyone is on board and everyone's on the same page. We're hoping to propose some code changes in lieu of the growing water smart mindset. And we want to make sure that our planning director knows that we're hoping to do that. So everything went great. We're just working through this process really collaboratively, which is really good. And then last week we ran it through the sustainability evaluation system led by Francie. And that's just so that we can have well-rounded decision-making throughout our planning of the plan. So we had folks there from planning, parks, open space, facilities, which is really great to get their points of view and their thoughts and concerns when we move to update kind of our water conservation standards moving forward. We're working on the turf transition plan with Water Now Alliance. We're reviewing phase 1 of the project at the end of the month. So that will be I think they're just presenting the research of best management practices that they've discussed so that we can just decide how we want to move forward with their recommendations plan for our turf transition plan on city-owned non-functional turf. And then lastly, we're still working through our code evaluation with our consultants. The review of the code and the development standards is complete. We're just waiting for our recommendations report. The sustainability planner in the planning department is helping me project manage this project, and he's out of town for the next 2 weeks. So when he gets back, then we're meeting with the consultant and we'll get a recommendations report on where we can better our code to be more water efficient, and then we'll go from there.
Questions for Hope?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yeah. Does the code include, does the sustainability part of the code include consideration not just of water conservation, but also water availability in terms of heat resistant, community, drinking fountains every so many feet in a park as opposed to just one at one end.
The audit that we're doing right now is mostly focused on development code and landscape standards and designs. So it won't be focused on that. It will mostly be on how we can save water in our land use planning.
So what I said is a subject for some other code review.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Cool.
Other questions? Dan?
I was just asking, Ken, were you aware of the water conservation native garden at Sandstone Ranch, the status of that project?
I didn't hear what the project is.
It was a capital project for this year under open space that was targeted to be a water conservation and a native garden, interpretive garden, right off the greenway on the backside of Sandstone Ranch.
Yes. The status that I know of currently is that the bids came above budget $40,000. So they were looking for $40,000 additional funding. Water Conservation is able to provide some of that. So hopefully Jim Crick is the project manager on that project. Hopefully he found the rest of it, and then we're hoping that we can plant. It's still a go as long as we can find the funding. It has not started yet. If that's
interesting, because I just heard from the water district that the city reimbursed the water district the $14,000 for the design.
Oh.
That it was not going to go. So
Okay.
I'm just just didn't make sense since you had St. Frank Left Hand make the commitment for the design. You had Northern Colorado that had the commitment to contribute $20,000 that we couldn't find a difference to make this happen.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that. I'll check in.
I can check with David too and
Yeah.
too, but
I will, and I'll report next time.
it was to be an interpretive xeriscape water conservation garden right along the greenway where it was going to be able to anticipate a lot of visitation and good interpretive opportunities. So
Is there a lot of area you're talking about?
it was,
I'd say a couple
probably 8,000 square feet, maybe. Decent sized garden. So,
I will check on that.
thank you.
Anybody know how that compares to the size of the xeriscape garden at Northern Water?
Oh, I can't imagine. Well, I know the design wasn't quite that significant.
No, yeah, way much smaller.
Much smaller?
Mhm.
Okay.
And the idea behind this demonstration garden, if I understand it correctly, was that it was to be only native plants, so that folks could take a look at Colorado native plants only.
I think that the Northern Water one is pretty close to all the native as well. But it's good.
Yeah, not new.
Okay, anybody else? Thanks, Hope.
Mhm.
Ken, I guess you're up next.
Yeah, wanted to kind of give you a quick update on the Windy Gap Farming project, and we start first with the connectivity channel, which is kind of a subset of the bigger project. It had, of course, you may recall, last late spring, early summer, with increased runoff in the Colorado River, so had some construction challenges. So just to refresh everybody's memory, this is the dam for the existing Windy Gap Reservoir. It came across the valley, Colorado River Valley, and then it came all the way down here to create the reservoir site. So the entire area here was and is still currently the reservoir site. The idea behind the connectivity channel is construct a intermediate berm dam right here. It makes the reservoir smaller, but it's still sufficiently large enough to be able to pump out of. This is the pumping plant right here. And then the area that's south of, was in the bottom of the reservoir currently, becomes the connectivity channel, basically a bypass channel around the reservoir. They had started this berm last year, and then unfortunately there was high enough flows, much higher than normal runoff this spring, that it went over this berm and inundated the whole area. So it took 2 or 3 days to, actually it didn't take as long as anybody thought, probably put them back about a week. They had to pump it out, kind of let it dry, and then get going again, and then reconstruct the top part of the berm, because this is actually a jurisdictional dam now. So that part was done last spring. Like I say, a little bit of setback, but luckily, time-wise, it wasn't too long. Here's the good news: is this bottom from the old dam down. This bottom part of the channel has now been completely constructed, and they're out there currently right now planting the native vegetation and the riparian plants. So from this point, they'll be done this fall, which is good. This part, they're still doing a little bit of work on, and they hope to maybe get some of the plants, even haven't done enough, they get some of the plants in this fall, but I'm not sure how, they won't get all the planting done, but they'll have a bulk of a lot of the channel built by before winter. they're rushing it, winter starts up there pretty quick. They have probably a month is all left. One interesting thing is, as they're constructing this berm here, this is now up high enough, they're not impossible, but there's not much of a concern about breaching next spring. And so the state engineer's office is letting them take the riprap off of the old dam and start putting it on the new dam to help even buttress it more, because you're gonna have wave action coming all winter long on this part now that it's up higher. And then next spring when it refills during spring run. So the good thing is the old dam is coming out. They haven't taken any of the material out yet, because the concern is you want to make sure this is high enough that you never breach it again, because then you'll breach this if it's not. If this isn't high enough, so they're kind of working on that right now, but it's good that they're doing that. Probably the only last I heard, right here is where a major new diversion structure is being built so that water can be diverted into the reservoir as opposed to a flow through. Right now it's a flow through. Now there will be a diversion structure here where the main part of the Colorado River will go through here, and then when they need water in the reservoir to pump, then they'll divert it out of the structure. And all the gates, unfortunately, there's a supply problem. We can't get the gates yet, but hopefully they'll have them by next spring, be able to put them in. But that's the connectivity channel. Really looking good. I mean, really you're getting close to it. And then once they haven't built it here to here because of the dam abatement. But as soon as that dam abatement comes in, they can quickly finish up connectivity. And then the next slide. So this is actually it's a week ago, but this is a more current picture of the Chimney Rock Dam. You really can start seeing the dam starting to come up here now. This
Made a lot of progress even since last month.
you really have. Last month you kind of imagined it when we were standing up when we did our tour. You kind of imagined an embankment. Now you can actually see. Definitely, you can see that embankment now. And this is even 1 week ago. So, only construction challenge they had was we got into a problem with some of the borrowed material from the quarry. So the quarry is granite, and all this fill, it has to be that good hard granite. So they're on the quarry, they have to take the overburden off, to take the fractured rock or some things like that. They have to. Well, they had stripped the quarry, pushed it off to the side, and unfortunately they're running 20 hours a day, so they're doing a lot of work at night, or in the dark, and they got into that overburden and ended up bringing it over here, so they had to move it back out and take it back out to the overburden pile. But other than that, things right now are going pretty well. Next slide. So this is as of the end of July. So now at the end of September, we're right here on the. You can see they're trying to ramp up a little bit. This is the ideal path. A little bit behind that right now. This is kind of the min and max construction schedule. Still trying to get it done by July of 2025. But right now, we just hit 50%, which is a milestone, which is really good news. We're now at 50% construction on that. That's the project right now. No real big news to talk about, but I'll give you a quick update on it.
Ken, back to Windy Gap, that gate thing has to go in.
Yes.
You're talking about.
Connectivity channel.
What else is missing then to complete what you want to do up there?
Not much, just just getting the big gates in. And actually the structure is what takes so long to build. So putting the gates in shouldn't be a big problem as soon as they come in. It's just, everybody wanted them in by now. But the rest of it is mostly earthwork and plants. I would suspect, I have not heard yet, that they've run into a problem. They had, on the plantings, that's a huge issue on a lot of native planting projects, is, getting native plants. And if nursery run out, if you can't get them, you gotta wait a whole year. It's not like hopefully they'll come in next month. It's neither have them or they don't. But I believe they had pre-ordered that stock, a lot of the stock for the plantings.
But with that gate, will it be fully functional then? When you get,
It will be. They still won't be able to put any water down the channel until they take the old dam out.
okay.
What's
the timing on that?
It takes getting the new dam up to height.
Right, sometime in the next year, or
It'll be next spring, because I imagine they'll run out of construction window by the end of October. Because it's so high.
Yeah.
You gotta be very careful.
So how do they determine what goes into the reservoir and then what goes in that channel? Is that northern? It makes that
That would be
call?
northern.
Based on the water right and the need of everything else that's flowing?
Mostly it'll be, they'll just start running water in there if they're gonna turn the pumps on.
Okay.
If the pumps are not pumping,
They'll put it in the channel.
put everything. Now, the fishery biologist will be working with the water quality folks. You also don't want to, you want to keep the reservoir very fresh. So if there is water running through it, you don't release any bad quality water. But most of the time, 10 months out of the year, it'll all be going through the bypass. And then they'll turn it on.
Because I know Grant County's doing their, stream management master plan?
Yes.
That'll probably be tomorrow night. Sure is. I'm assuming Northern, I think Northern's one is probably out, hoping to fund that, and I think they're sponsoring the process.
And they're also putting a lot of
Effort.
scientific information, a lot of water quality that nobody else has. So we're sharing all of that.
Anything else for Ken?
I was just gonna ask, who's the contractor who's doing the construction up there?
You're stumping me there. I think it's Colorado constructors, but I'll have to double check on that one.
I've always been interested in these artificial channel reconstructions. There's a one up in Montana that's kind of special to me, so I've just always been interested in just this kind of things.
Yeah, just the one east of Bozeman.
Yeah, well, just out of Anaconda, so Warren Springs. It's pretty interesting.
It's on I-90.
Right.
See it as you drive right down it.
Yeah, it's always
Pretty neat.
Yeah, it's an art. You know?
This will be just as neat, and it's going to be open to the public. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess let's go look at it.
Yeah.
Okay. What's Scott's status? Is he here? Is he landing or what?
You can hear us.
Here,
Fine,
Scott?
Roger. I'm not sure what's on connectivity. I've got some still on just audio.
Okay, well, you can hear us fine? Okay. Why don't we go back to item 8 and start talking about cash and moves to West, I'll let you take it from there.
All right, I'll kind of get it started and then in that conversation, Ken can jump in. So as the board will recall, about 18 months ago, City Council established the current fee of cash in lieu at $48.5. That fee was based on the cost of providing 1 acre-foot of firm water supply to the water treatment plant. There's 2 components to that. There's the water right, and then the storage part, which helps create that firm water delivery, i.e. in the wintertime. And so at that time, it was broken out. It was $30,000 per acre foot for the water right, and $18,500 for the city's investment at that time for the firming project, commonly referred to as Chimney Hollow. And so, again, for the last 18 months, that's kind of just been kind of rolling along. Then in 2022, the Platte River Power Authority Board directed their staff to sell an additional 10 allotment units. These are unfirmed allotment units, so it's strictly just the parent water, if you will, the CBT water. So they they offered 5 of the 10 in 2023. That closed back in August 22nd, so last month. When they put that offer, they had 5 bids from 5 different entities, ranging in price from $3.8 million to $4.5 million. As the board may recall, 1 acre foot or 1 unit is equivalent of 100 acre feet. So, in other words, they established a minimum criteria to bid that included a value of not less than $38,000 per acre foot. So they got their 5 bids from 5 entities. They are evaluating those. They had certain criteria that in order to bid, you had to be a qualifying entity, so somebody that was going to be able to have those. So we don't know who the bids came from. We don't know how much exactly any individual entity bid for. That may or may not become public knowledge in the near future. But what we do know is that they received bids in August with a high bid of $45,000 per acre foot. So in other words, they received bid at least 1 bid for $4.5 million per unit of wind gap. So therefore, if you kind of think of it, I think one of the best ways to think of it is kind of a comparable on a house. And you're trying to find the value of your house. If you bought a house like my parents did back in the 60s and paid, $15,000, that's probably not what the house is worth now. Something more recent, so these comparables probably reflect what the value is of the the wind gap now. And so what we have there is that results going from $30,000 an acre foot to $45,000 an acre foot. The second part of that, which is the kind of the firming part, the construction part of it, there was significant cost increase due to the federal lawsuit. Those combined costs, the project was around $37 million. When you take that and put it to Longmont's cost, it works out to approximately $1,000 an acre foot. So that would then adjust the previous projection of $18,500 for that part to $19,500. Ken spoke a little bit earlier today about the Colorado River Connectivity Channel project. Really no additional costs for that are anticipated, but that haven't already been budgeted. So when you add the two up, the $45,000 an acre foot for the water right and the $19,500 for the additional cost for to settle the federal lawsuit, the combined total then comes to total due would be $64,500. So that's the total current water project cost estimate on a per acre foot basis would be now $64,500. And so with another consideration, Water Board has always taken the data and made a recommendation to council on what they believe the fee for cash in lieu of water rights received should be. In this instance, we think additionally it would merit us having a more thorough process to inform the public and interested stakeholders about an increase. So should the board recommend council review the fee and adjust, for example, the 64.5, we would want to be sure that we have a good process in place. So because that's a fairly significant change. And so we would want to do that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Ken may have some additional information or whatever questions we'll try to answer for you if we can.
Just on the process, a good process in place before this decision is made or coupled with the decision going down the line. What's the timing of a good process and how do you describe that?
So really what we want to do is, Water Board obviously could return a recommendation to leave the cash flow as it is. Could come somewhere in between. But if we go to this number, up to 64,000, it's a pretty good jump. The last time we had a big jump, we called every single developer that was out there. We called planning. We went through the design review process with the city. We informed everybody we could. We still had some pushback about not enough people heard about it. There was concern about what it will do to the development process. So what we're really looking for, if Water Board recommends something in the range of in the high 50s or into the 60s, then before we would take that recommendation to council, we would make sure we reached out to everybody we could to let them know that that's happening.
So, Dan first.
So if we recommend the 64.5 or any number, and we want to go through the process, do you have dollars budgeted available to go through that process?
It's just going to be staff time. So
Okay.
the process is the staff determining how to best inform everyone that needs to know about it.
So you're not talking about any kind of
No consultant.
press releases and letters, or community survey or anything like that could cost additional dollars.
Yeah.
Everything's going
Not
to be done
envisioning
in-house,
that.
basically. I look at the existing staffs and okay,
It's right
a
at.
lot of process.
I think the goal is for anyone that has the ability, they're in the process so that they are eligible to satisfy deficits, that they're made aware.
Right.
Like, there's properties out there that have been, for example, annexed for decades. As soon as you annex, you have the opportunity to satisfy all remaining deficits. If you choose not to, that's fine, but you're saying you're waiting until some later date, which may include a higher price to satisfy your deficits. So there's those situations. You also have people that are just getting into the development process. They're at the very beginning, And they're having just conversations, pre-application type meetings with the planning department. And they don't even have a plat yet. They just have a site plan or something like that. We're just wanting everyone to know, and then give them enough time that if they're like, this is significant, maybe they would have an opportunity to satisfy deficits at the current rate before it changes. And that's what happened the last time we did this 18 months ago. Took a significant influx of money, as you might expect.
How much time did you give last time before it was enacted?
I don't think there was like a defined time, but the process felt like it probably close to 6 months.
Okay.
Because this was a big deal.
I cut in line.
Yeah.
Marcia, do you have something?
Yeah, I do. There are some incentives in place, and
Someone?
some incentives in place for, again, you have to, for these early process developments, well, you got to satisfy either with fee in lieu or with more water rights if you're not there before you can build, right?
Correct.
And so there are some incentives that lower, that cut, is it in half? The fee in lieu that has to be paid by affordable, and I think they just changed it to attainable. I won't swear to it because sometimes I I don't remember whether stuff's first and second reading or just a proposal, so it would have to be verifiable, but the process needs to include the impact of those incentives and making sure that the impact of the incentives on development is included as well, in terms of builders knowing how they're going to be impacted by those incentives. And a potential upside that I see is we have been struggling to get people to build more for sale, but low cost housing. And and instead we're getting people coming in with $700,000 townhomes, as a proposal. And so this might be a really nice lever to incentivize people to build inventory at a lower cost. So because of that, I would suggest that the process include involving the planners to do that analysis. Again, just my suggestion, but I think it could be a big benefit to the city to do that.
Yeah, we'd absolutely want, and I agree with you, Marcia, the affordable housing is pretty well set. The attainable housing is a work in progress.
Yes.
And it's not all, there's a lot there. There's some language in the code.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is set in code,
Get her done,
meat behind
maybe
the sausage is got some that puts some meat on some of those bones, and that's why we don't want to bump it up before we've got an opportunity to work with our housing folks, work with our planners, work with the development community, and so mostly so our normal process is when the water board makes a recommendation, we kind of have a standing spot on the council agenda about a month out after the recommendation. So that's when we go to council, and then that's when it is reviewed. But it will be a number of months so that we can, just wanted to let the water board know. And if anything huge comes out of that process, we'll come back and inform water board. We'll certainly let you know in October and what we're doing. And I easily could see this being, we spent extraordinary, I've never done that big an effort that we did last time, and we were still asked to do more. So to be real honest, we have to craft what we're going to do to make sure everybody's happy, and to make sure everybody feels like we've involved everybody, covered everybody, informed everybody. It's still a recommendation, and it's still going to be our board's recommendation by the council. So.
Wes, remind me what the standard is for requirements. I mean, I know that at time of annexation, your historic water rights come to the city. What about development standard that's required?
So I think, let me see if I understood your question. Well, I may answer it in a different way. So the policy requires at time of annexation, transfer of all historical water rights that were pertinent to the property. So that has to happen for any property that's ever developed in Longmont. Because of that, every annexation has its own unique remaining deficit. So you'll have annexations, some annexations that have a sufficient amount of historic that there are no further raw water requirements. So in other words, they can, after annexation, they can develop without having to bring any more non-historic or pay cash in lieu. On the other extreme, you could have a piece of property that has no historical water rights. They can still annex, but in order to develop, they're going to need to satisfy the remaining 3 acre-feet per acre. So in that case, they're going to have to bring, either non-historic or whatever the equivalent cash in lieu would be. So every annexation is unique. The one consistent is every property that has developed in Longmont prior or following the formation of Water Board in 1963 has satisfied the 3 acre-foot per acre minimum. And the policy is an area-based policy. It's not a use-based policy. So, so with that being said, if you come into Longmont and annex, normally, this is a big average because everyone is unique, but normally you would satisfy 1.5 to 2 of the 3 acre-feet required as historic. So usually you satisfy at least half or more as historic. Then, when you come through and satisfy the remainder, you can either transfer a non-historic water that's acceptable or pay cash in lieu. And so we've seen a mix. I've seen where people haven't paid any cash in lieu and just did all water rights. I've seen it where some people have paid everything with cash in lieu. It just depends, and it's their own decision is what they want to do.
Sure. But that standard is 3 acre-feet per acre development.
That's right. In order to develop, you have to satisfy not less than 3 acre-foot, and that's in our raw water requirements. Thank you.
And that non-historical can be met anytime up until the plat. They can't get a plat unless they, okay.
Tom, do you have something?
I did.
You did, but you don't?
I do remember raising my hand, so I must have.
All right.
But it's gone. So I'll think about
Randy,
it.
if you have something.
Well, I have lots. So first, I would love to back up and actually talk about the amount rather than just the public process of communicating it. Both are important. But to stick with the public process of communicating it, would it be, I think it would be appropriate for us to say, hey, we're going to phase these in either over the next 4 quarters or something, but have very specific dates. And that can be either included at the city council level, but also potentially at the recommendation level. I think having a recommendation without a date, you're gonna have a process that goes in there. It would be more transparency to have there be a deadline or a date when it actually becomes effective, rather than saying, hey, we're gonna increase it this much. When? From a water board member perspective, I'd like to be able to say, on this date. I do realize that you guys have work to do in between, and so that's kind of giving you a deadline, which is maybe not popular. I understand that feeling, but it seems like if we're gonna not phase it in immediately or not do it immediately, we should have some clarity around when it's gonna hit. January 1st is a really reliable time. People can understand new year, new rules. Just a suggestion. But backing up about the amount, because that's the part that I own most dearly as a water board member. I have some questions there. You've got 5 bids, but none of them have become the final bid, right? So the sale isn't final with PRPA.
They will have to go to their board and accept those bids.
Okay, but right now we're looking at the highest bid to base our board, our fee on.
We know that at least one bid included a bid for for 4.5. I don't know if that included for 1 unit, 2, 3, 4, or 5. They didn't tell us that.
Okay, so here's my sitch, is that if we base it on the highest bid, and then the one that actually gets approved is lower, that to me makes us feel like, I would like there to be a tighter connection there. Do you understand what I'm getting at? There's a bit of a disconnect. If we picked this number out here, but they actually went with this number here, if we're basing our cash in lieu on it, I'd like it to be a done deal.
I was gonna ask kind of a similar thing, which was, what is there? So if you put yourself on the board, right, what would be the criterion by which you would assess those bids? And why would you not perhaps accept the highest bid, right? So in other words, like, are there other factors that are not just embedded in the price? Are there other factors that perhaps are somehow hidden but are monetary also, right? So in other words, like, maybe we're basing it on the higher price, but the higher price is like somehow artificially high because they're not kind of including some, or because they've included other things that everybody else perhaps had as separate line items or something.
I know, for example, sometimes it can be, will you buy all of them, even if it's a lower price?
Sure.
Somebody buys all of them, so then there's not any hang.
Yeah, there you go.
There's functional things like that. But I don't know that we want to get into that level of detail. I just like something that's the final answer from them, whatever that may be. And then some of my other questions, because I have a bucket of them. My big fundamental question, and I brought this up before, is we're now including water rights in this cash in lieu valuation. Okay, that's cool. How do we know we're not double dipping and double charging, and that none of these facilities, storage and water rights, are being included in the system development charges? Because if we're double dipping on assets, that is, I think, opens us up for a lawsuit. And I would love to make sure that somebody has checked that. And it may be that I'm not getting it, and I'm not saying that we are. I want to be clear, but I really want to make sure that we're not, because that's one of the things that I see as a public member talking to you guys, is to try to protect the city from a lawsuit. And so, making sure that what's in the SDC charge is here, what's in the Windy Gap firming charge that's also stated kind of part of the SDCs when you go and read the municipal code, and the cash in lieu amount, making sure everything's in its own bucket and there's not something that's getting counted twice. Because that's a double dip, and that could get us busted. And I say, us, me, I'm on your team, I'm on your side on that one. And then, let's see. Okay, that's another question I had. When you do a system development charge, and this is an element of that, right? You look at, I've got my formula, and it's a super duper awesome formula. You take the system value, which is your assets, which is what we're trying to capture with the PRPA sale, in part, and then your capacity, and that's your unused capacity. So are we saying all of the Windy Gap firming project is for new growth? Because if it's benefiting current customers, some of that should be paid for by rates. If it's only benefiting new customers, well, okay. But can you help me understand, has somebody looked at what the capacity is of this that's going to be going to current customers?
Yeah, that was done when we chose our final participation level in the project.
Okay.
And I'm not going to remember the exact number, but it was about 6,800 acre feet was for new development. And then everything above the 6,800 acre feet was for existing system. And so we are paying part of the Windy Gap firming project out of cash in lieu and other development fees.
Okay.
And then part of it out of
rates.
rate fees, and we've got that separated.
Great, love that. Thank you. Okay, so other than the double dip question, just love to cover our bases on that. I've also done kind of a light survey of system development charges in the area, including ours, and we're not out of line. We're not crazy expensive, so that's a comfort. It's not how you set fees, but it's nice to know we're not crazy. Okay, thank you.
Scott wants to
That is
ask
a good
a
point.
Yeah, let's take, Scott,
Ask the question.
you there, Scott?
Yeah, my hand was up a while ago, and actually Renee covered what I was gonna ask about, which was the fact that the bid prices aren't final and aren't accepted until they are. So I didn't wanna tie us to a potentially different number than what comes out, if that's the rational basis for what our final cash and move recommendation is. That said, I'm comfortable with the concept, and I don't know if we have the ability to find it out at a time certain what that final number is, but maybe the messaging is, let's connect with our development community, let them know that there is going to be an increase, and it will be final within X number of days, which I guess PRPA is gonna have to do with this the next probably 30 to 60 days, and hope to give a final better number 60 days in advance of January 1st, and have a January 1st change date. But I'm comfortable with the way that we're going through this. I'm comfortable with the answers that provided to raise questions for defendability purposes. And I would support the motion if that's going to be offered in that range. I do have a hard stop at about 8 minutes, so I just want to put that out there.
Well, let me quickly, Wes, as far as tying down a bid number, how far away is that?
I don't know that, the Platte River Power Authority has told us a definitive date. I think they have to go to their board. They set they closed their bid on August 22nd. They were pleased with the bids and they anticipate selling all 5 units, but I don't know what their process is. I would like to think it's within a month, the board is gonna take action on those bids they received.
Well, I guess my point is, before relocking the number, I think the concern is, we want to know the bid number before we lock in a number. I think that's what I'm hearing.
The accepted bids, so
Yeah.
they've received, like I said, they got 5 bids from 5 entities. So you may have one entity that wanted all 5, you may have the second entity that wanted 3, the third one that had 1, and so they're gonna take, I would presume, working top down, 1 and then maybe 2, or 1, 1, 1, or whatever. So I think what I'm hearing you say is whichever ones they're using for the 5 they accept, that's the value that you're looking for. Maybe it might even go so far as to say what the average sales price is.
I guess what I'm saying, rather than before we decide on a number, I think it's our intention to get a firm number for this bid thing, so.
That's no problem. I think,
Yeah,
we have another quarterly review in December. So I'm reasonably certain they'll have that
we'd be
in
more
front of their board
comfortable with
before December.
Does our board meet in December? I'm thinking not. I'm thinking the last board meeting is in November.
But they would have their meeting before the December water board meeting.
Ah, yes.
That's what I'm thinking, is that we'll have that
it.
more tied down.
I'm just thinking about what's council's process? Would we take this information to council in a study session or an executive session where, we're providing a range, but no matter what, the increase is gonna be significant. Even if, it's $3,800 and they take it all. That's still, looking at that average, jumps it up to 57.5. So it's significant, and you're still gonna wanna go through that process. That gives you certainly time to hear back from the board, but to be able to present this information to council now, whether it's a study session, executive session, to get a sense of direction, would be my thought. And again, it's gonna be that range of 57.5 to 64.5, which is a significant increase. You're still gonna wanna do that 6-month process or pick a date when it's gonna be done.
Well, I think
But
we have to pick it.
I would agree with
Between council, but I think there should be a clear date so that it doesn't,
yeah,
otherwise it feels loosey-goosey, like
I would agree with you.
somebody's buddy gets in and somebody else doesn't.
Let me do that process.
Let me just tie something down. I think what we're saying is we want to wait, we know the bid number before we set it.
No, they're in the double bit.
Yeah, but anyway, Scott, I think probably a decision's not gonna be made today. So we get more information, so, I just wanted you to know that.
So you're safe.
Roger, I appreciate that, it makes sense, and I wasn't
Information
certain as
item
to
to
whether
council, so they see what's
council
going on.
would like us to move faster than that, or try to accommodate that possibility, but I prefer waiting until we get a final number, because it's a component, and if we're spelling it out for people at a fairly substantial increase, you know, we had a 100% increase 18 months ago, we're talking about another 33% here, give or take, so, we need to be able to articulate clearly what it is we need and why.
Okay. Marcia?
Yeah, I just thought the board's changed quite a bit since 18 months ago. And some of it's changed back, I think, but.
Yeah. And that perspective is informing this conversation.
Yes, but I'd like to remind the board that the last time there was a recommendation from the board, which I believe that 18 months ago was stay the course, and of course it's been stay the course ever since. The council was confronted by the public who said, we're leaving money on the table. Look at all the fees and lieu charged by the surrounding municipalities. And you know, their point was that we're not looking at what the market will bear. We're only looking at costs. And the council changed that, right? And so this process that PRPA is going through is, to me, it sounds like an indicator of what the market will bear, but is it necessarily the only indicator? You know, should we still not be looking at what has happened in the last 18 months, coming up on 2 years by the time it gets put in, of what other municipalities, other purchasers of water rights are doing?
Yeah, we actually in the past have included that information. Certainly more than happy to continue to include that. We wanted to focus today on, we knew this was a big enough increase.
Yeah.
It was like, wow.
Yeah,
But more than happy to continue to provide that.
right.
I was just gonna say that because there's been, you know, some of that turnover, et cetera, I mean, it may be helpful to rehash just a tiny bit of like how that previous number came about, right? And if I recall, 18 months ago, we went from 18 something up to 48 something, right? So that was a much larger change than even what we're talking about now. I mean, it's another 100% or so different than what in terms of percent change than what we did before. So of course that was a shock to the system, I think. When I hear the numbers 48, when I hear the number 64, I'm like, well, it's like almost in the same ballpark, I guess, unless I'm spending the money, of course.
Yeah.
So then I'm thinking to myself, oh, definitely I don't want to spend that, right? So, but at the same time, it's not nearly the increase I don't think that we did before. And so, so in terms of getting the message out there, I think that we still, of course, need to do that. And of course, people will still be shocked, perhaps, especially if they're going to spend money, but maybe not quite as much as they were. I don't know.
Well, anyway, to kind of tie this together, I think the desire is hold this over until we get firm numbers. I think everybody would be more comfortable with that.
And we feel we'll know even more in October.
Yeah.
We can continue to report back to the board what we're hearing and what's happening.
All right.
And then at our December quarterly review.
Any problems with that? Renee, you all right with that?
I'm good.
So Scott, we wrap that up.
Yeah. Scott's
And you ought to be here the next time we do this, Scott. Okay, well, thanks for the information and
Thank you.
I guess, well, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Get it on later. I think some good points have been made that we'll carry forward with this and see where it goes. So, items from the board: review of water board bylaws. Who want to do that?
I'll just let the board know that last month we took to the board the then and the still current water board bylaws that you guys are operating under. Those were created back in November 2021, and last month it was brought to our attention that there was a few different dates that would, for consistency's sake, make sense to keep those similar. So there was a couple changes that were made. One was, I think, in section 5 in terms of providing the board with the packets not less than 3 days before. And then the second one was any resolutions shall be presented to the board at least 3 days prior to. So we made those couple changes to make it consistent, and these are your bylaws that you guys use. So I just thought usually it makes sense to have bylaws that are current and make sense to the board. And so you guys are welcome to accept these, or if you have other changes you want us to make, but again, they're your bylaws.
Didn't we have the opportunity to voice what changes we wanted, and basically that's been taken care of?
That's correct.
So I don't know if there's anybody who has any desire to bring anything else up, but it sounds like the ground's been covered. Okay. All right. Thanks for your help on that.
Okay.
So
Do we need-
It would probably be
Yeah.
beneficial to have a.
Somebody want to make a motion to accept?
I wish to accept the bylaws.
Yeah, I'll second.
Second.
The amendments.
Okay, all right. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Say aye.
And we'll probably anticipate, just for what it's worth, to bring these next July or August. It seems to make sense if there's a new board member, that's a good time for everyone to freshen up on what your bylaws are and get the new person. So that's what we'll plan. We'll plan to bring it in July or August of next year for everybody's review again. Okay.
So Wes, that leads me to think nobody's going off this half year and we're full up, is that correct?
That's correct.
How refreshing that is.
Okay. Any comments on major project listings? Comments on that at all, or you all right with that?
Yeah, we're trying to give, we have several different items and they're all listed there in your status report, and trying to have it to where we could have kind of a significant item each month. So you can see that there was something scheduled for September, October, so forth. But sometimes, for whatever reason, groups can't attend, so we'll adjust accordingly. But we'll try to reschedule the strategic integration group as soon as we can, and continue to give everybody an idea of when we might be bringing these other items to the board.
Hey Russ, what were they gonna present on?
They were gonna talk mainly a lot about what Renee was bringing up about the fees and how they came to be and what those fees are, and it would have been great for you to be able to ask your question of them, as they are the experts.
No, I
And
was
so-
like, oh, this will take care of it.
Exactly, so we'll see, we'll do our best to try to see if we can't get them to Waterboard as soon as possible.
Who are them?
Well,
Vicky Doyle.
Becky Doyle is the executive director for that, so I don't know if it will be her or if it'll be somebody underneath her. But it'll be-
She was gonna have Raymond Norton do the actual presentation. Raymond's
A fee analyst.
newer and a fee analyst, and newer, and give her an opportunity to make a presentation. It would have been great.
we'll get there.
And then you know my question. That's
Okay, item 11, no info on item attachments. Items tentatively scheduled for future board meetings. You guys discussed future water board agendas, maybe you covered that, Wes.
Unless there was something else that the board would like us to make sure we get kind of on the docket, yeah. But we don't have anything beyond.
Again, it was kind of a personal item for me. How many houses does Water Resources currently own? What's the status of those houses? Are they in the process of being shifted into another work group? Or Water Resources being compensated for that? It'd be nice to have an understanding of that, because I know it's my understanding that there's now an MOU between the Housing Authority and maybe Natural Resources. But I know you have the same type of houses that fall into those categories. Is there an MOU between?
I think the MOU included both
Okay.
houses owned by the Open Space Department, Open Space Fund, as well as one house, storm drainage fund, and a number of the houses under water. When we purchased land around on the reservoir, so that house. So, yeah, that's a good one. It'd be easier if we did a quick write-up on that, and we can bring that back.
Yeah.
The short answer, we have, what do we got, 4 houses that are union? Four houses.
Are they occupied?
They're occupied, they're rented right now. 2 are being rented by people we purchased the property from. And kind of the gentleman's agreement. One was a 3-year term, probably about 1.5 years left on the other ones. The property owner is also leasing the property and farming it. So that's the best use of that right now. Those are going right into the program. The other 2, when the current tenant's leases expire, then the lease, right now we use a property management agency to lease the property out. And the lease will be managed through our housing authority at that point.
Just to have a better understanding, because again, we're talking about, at least $2 million worth of assets that are owned by the Water Resources.
Yeah.
And
So you'll get back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm just curious.
All right. That's all right. Anybody got anything else before we adjourn? Thank you. We're adjourned.